Jessica's pod descended through Earth's atmosphere with a violent shudder that made her question every decision that had led her here. The Galactic Marriage Exchange Program had promised her a comfortable life, with a wealthy human merchant in Sector 7, New York. Instead, her navigation systems had malfunctioned, and she was hurtling towards some backwater coordinates in rural Montana. The crash landing was far from gentle. When Jessica finally emerged from the smoking wreckage, her violet skin glistening in the unfamiliar yellow sunlight, she found herself staring at a weathered farmhouse that looked nothing like the gleaming penthouse she'd been promised. A man in his 50s rushed out, his weathered face a mask of confusion and concern. "Are you all right, miss?" He approached cautiously, eyeing her crystalline horns and the faintly glowing marks along her arms. Jessica's translator implant kicked in. "I am unharmed, but this is incorrect. I was meant for Marcus Chen, New York." The man's expression shifted to understanding, then sympathy. "Well, you're about 2,000 miles off course. I'm Robert Mitchell. This is my farm." He paused, glancing back at the house. "Look, it's getting dark. You can stay here tonight and we'll figure out how to get you where you need to go in the morning." Jessica had little choice. Her communication device was fried, and her species couldn't survive the cold Earth nights without shelter. That's when she met Jack. He was in the living room, seated in a wheelchair modified with what looked like human ingenuity at its finest. Makeshift controls, custom grips, and additional support systems clearly built by hand. The young man, perhaps 25 Earth years, had gentle brown eyes that lit up with curiosity rather than the pity or fear she'd expected. "An actual Zentari," Jack breathed, his voice filled with wonder. "Dad, do you know how rare they are? There are only about 10,000 of them in the entire exchange program." Jessica bristled slightly. "You have studied my people?" "Studied everything I could get my hands on," Jack said, maneuvering his chair closer with practiced ease. "Xenobiology, exolinguistics, comparative civilization studies. When you can't walk, you learn to travel other ways." He grinned. "I'm Jack, by the way. Sorry about the dramatic entrance to our humble home." Over dinner, Robert had hastily prepared something he assured her was vegetarian. Having read that Zentari couldn't process meat proteins, Jessica learned Jack's story. A farming accident at 17 had severed his spinal cord. On her world, such an injury would be trivial to repair. But here in rural Earth, far from the advanced medical centers, Jack's family couldn't afford the regenerative treatments. The doctors said it would cost more than we'd make in 10 years. Robert explained quietly. "We've been saving, but the farm keeps needing the money more than I need to walk," Jack finished, though his tone held no bitterness. "Besides, I've adapted. I've been helping Dad optimize the farm yields using some algorithms I developed. Increased productivity by 40% in 2 years." Jessica stared at him. "You taught yourself computational agriculture? And drone maintenance, crop genetics, market analysis?" Jack shrugged. "The internet's a beautiful thing. And when you have time, you have the luxury of learning." Over the next 3 days, as Robert worked on contacting the exchange program to arrange her transport, Jessica found herself drawn to Jack's workshop, a converted barn filled with screens, salvaged equipment, and half-finished projects. He was designing an automated irrigation system using recycled parts and open-source software. "Most of humanity works like this," Jack explained, noticing her fascination. "We don't have the resources of the Zentari Empire or the Karathi Federation. So we improvise, we adapt. We make do with what we have and somehow make it work better than it has any right to." Jessica watched him work, his fingers flying across keyboards, his mind processing complex calculations, his body's limitations utterly failing to limit his spirit. On her world, he would have been pitied, perhaps even hidden away. Here he was building things, learning, contributing. "Your civilization called us primitive in the first contact reports," Jack said one evening, not accusingly, just matter-of-factly. "And by your standards, we are. We still have poverty, disease, suffering. But we also have this." He gestured around his workshop. "We have the refusal to accept limitations. Every human achievement came from someone who looked at an impossible problem and decided to solve it anyway." On the 4th day, the exchange program finally responded. They would send transport, but it would take a week. Jessica found herself relieved rather than frustrated. She began helping Jack with his projects. Her Zentari education included advanced engineering, and together they refined his designs. But more than that, she learned. She learned about resilience, about the peculiar human trait of thriving despite, or perhaps because of, adversity. "Why do you not feel sorry for yourself?" she asked one night as they debugged code together. Jack considered this. What would be the point? I can't change what happened. I can only change what I do next. That's very human, I think. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest species out there, but we're maybe the most stubborn. We just don't quit. When the transport finally arrived, Jessica stood in the farmyard, her belongings repacked, facing a decision. She could continue to New York, to a life of comfort with a man she'd never met, following a contract signed on another world, or she could stay here. "The exchange program has a provision," she said slowly, looking at Jack, "for redirected matches." "If both parties agree." Robert looked between them, understanding dawning. Jack's expression was carefully neutral. "Jessica, you don't have to." "I know I do not have to," she interrupted. "But I want to. Your son has shown me something my people had forgotten. That strength is not the absence of weakness, but what you build despite it. That humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy is not your technology or your resources, but your absolute refusal to be defeated by circumstance." She knelt beside Jack's wheelchair, meeting his eyes. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you do not electrocute yourself in that workshop." Jack laughed, and in that moment Jessica knew she'd made the right choice. She'd been shipped to the wrong address, but somehow she'd ended up exactly where she belonged. Among humans. Among people who turned obstacles into opportunities, who built wonders from scraps, who looked at the impossible and said, "Watch me." That was humanity. That was Jack, and now it was home. The end.